Welcome on into the show, everybody. It is episode 5, season 8 here on the Hooper's Log. That's right, we are here talking about the NBA regular season tip-off as it begins tonight as the de facto top two Eastern Conference teams between the Bucks and the Nets play tonight. First thing at 7:30 p.m. Pacific, 4:30 p.m. 4:30 p.m. Pacific, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, and then obviously you have the rematch of one of the greatest wild card round matchups ever between the Lakers and the Golden State Warriors. And as we all know, the Golden State Warriors are going to be healthy, probably come Christmas time, if not right after Christmas. So looking forward to that when Klay Thompson comes back. Steph Curry really just turning into one of his own lately. He's become an unbelievable stud here over the last, 5 to 6 years. He's become easily one of the greatest point guards of all time. And then you obviously have the Lakers, who are really everybody's favorite to get to the NBA championship through the Western Conference. And then, like I'd mentioned, the first game to tip everything off, the Bucks getting their rings, getting their championship trophy, their swagger back, and then the de facto Eastern Conference favorite, dependent upon if everybody is there and if everything stays the same, which something tells me that's not going to be the case moving forward with the way things are with one Kyrie Irving. We're going to talk about him a little bit here later on in the show, but I wanted to get through a couple of things before we get to these games and preview them for you and how they're going to play out, because I got a couple of guys I want to talk about because they've made some big time news. I've mentioned Ben Simmons a couple of shows ago, a couple Tuesdays ago here on the Lead SM, TLSM, however you get us here on Podbean is where we have all of our shows pop up and are provided for you. We've been here for almost a month now. It has been an absolute blast here as we go into week 5 of our content production, and the season tips off tonight. So we are all, I'm sure all of us here are just thrilled to finally have some real basketball being bounced on floors and things that actually matter as we start the run and the jaunt towards the mid-April finish line for when the postseason begins, as it is just an absolute grind as we all like to go, but it's also at the same time actual real content as we all provide it. So anyway, wanted to get that going for you again. We got all of our shows here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If I'm not mistaken, we even got shows on Saturday from every once in a while from time to time. So please keep on listening here on the podcast. But yes, I mentioned Ben Simmons a couple of Tuesdays ago. So that's my take on him. He clearly popped up back in the news again, showing up to Philadelphia, getting ready to prep to play games, obviously, from what it sounds like, even though he said he didn't want to, etc. I talk about that a couple of Tuesdays ago in episode 3, season 8 of the Hooper's Log. But there are a couple other guys that I wanted to mention. But one guy I think who would be stealing all of the spotlight in regards to the conversations around everything off-season wise would be one Deandre Ayton right now. Let's be honest, if it wasn't for Kyrie Irving and Ben Simmons and their shenanigans regarding their contracts or COVID or vaccines or whatever, let's all be 100% honest right now. What Deandre Ayton said this past week regarding his contract situation was fascinating nonetheless. And it's fascinating from multiple perspectives because what he said in particular regarding how he felt that he was just as valuable, if not more valuable, roughly paraphrasing here, regarding his value in how he should get his contract renewed from his rookie contract. Because remember, he got drafted in 2018, the first pick. And in that same draft are guys like Luka Doncic and Trae Young. And we can all sit back and debate, who's better of the two. I think it's easy right now from a production perspective, not from a winning, not from a success in regards to team success perspective. The production value alone is Luka Doncic. He's in the conversation for potentially winning MVP here sometime soon. But when it comes to the team game, we can make the debate that Trae Young has been the better team player. Looking at the Atlanta Hawks last year going to the Eastern Conference Finals, it's pretty tough to debate. On top of, Luka Doncic has definitely grown rapidly a reputation of his ability to get under the referee's skin. He's kind of getting very James Harden-like in regards to his ability to try and, bait for fouls, and when he doesn't get his way, he gets super frustrated to the point where it's like, dude, what are you doing? Referees are less likely to give him what he wants based on his reactions. Not just that, but he's growing a reputation, and overall, though, his production still, from a just volume perspective, is uncannily ridiculous for where he's at. And he's on pace to really kind of set trends that we've never seen before from a statistical perspective. But Trae Young's kind of in a similar concept. Trae Young is he is not in the category of Steph Curry per se, but in regards to his mold and how he's made up and how he plays the game, it's Steph Curry like. And that's a big compliment to him and where he's at in his career thus far. And based on the fact that the Atlanta Hawks got as far as they did, that's a huge credit to Trae Young and his ability to really sacrifice for the betterment of the team, but also to have his opportunities shine as they come to him instead of forcing them like a Luka Doncic. The point being to all of this is that Deandre Ayton feels like he's in the similar category as those two. And I think the fascinating conversation is depending on how you look at DeAndre Ayton's situation and where he's at, short-term, long-term now, short-term as in, over this next year, now as in what he said over the past week, and long-term as in if he were to quote-unquote get a max, which is $170 million affecting the cap room moving forward. It's a fascinating debate and conversation that I think a lot of people don't want to necessarily have, because I think a lot of people's expectations of the Phoenix Suns are not what they were a year ago in regards to they didn't have any expectations a year ago. Nobody was having expectations of the Phoenix Suns because nobody thought that they'd get to this point again. Everybody kind of thought Chris Paul would go there, figure it out, kind of, rest on his laurels of his career and call it a career. And the next thing he's leading this team to the NBA Finals, and he's brushing off demons from the past, getting past portions of his career he'd never seen before. He really brushed off, that Tracy McGrady rust of, I can't even get past the first round. Or if I do get past the first round, I'm impeccably bad in the second round, and I've never seen a conference finals. Well, he did all of that getting to the NBA Finals. And now the real question is a guy like Chris Paul in his age and where he's at in his career, you start to look at the conversation of, well, Chris Paul's obviously not going to be there forever, and Devin Booker is, really looking like he's going to be a lifelong Phoenix Suns, guard for forever. And he's relatively young still, obviously being drafted in 2015. But you look at that scenario and where we are within all those guys and how the layout of the team shakes out. They have an unbelievable bench. I mean, they have depth for depth. Their depth is incredible altogether. It's just what they did in the playoffs was uncanny from what the Phoenix Suns we've seen over the years. And that's a credit to Monty Williams and a credit to that staff and what they've created. And obviously, if you want to jump back into the whole conversation of where this team started, it really did start with the conversation of a guy like DeAndre Ayton. We know DeAndre Ayton is not the focal point of that team, but we do know that his impact on the defensive side is valuable nonetheless. And it's so valuable that anything that goes inside, he is the number one de facto guy to discuss regarding where things need to go on the defensive side. I mean, he is in that category. He's in that conversation. He was absolutely incredible and it just absolutely remarkable. Adjectives, place adjective here. That's what he did for them defensively. But I think it's fair to say that depending on how you view the value of him in the long term regarding what this team will look like, they have to bank on a lot of things to happen for him to be the same valued player that he was on that team. Really a third, fourth option, and even sometimes really a fifth or sixth option offensively. And what I mean by that is a guy who doesn't really have plays developed around to have him be the man. And if you're going to sign him as a long-term option and a max player regarding his ability to impact the basketball game, it's going to be very, very hard to do so because of the way the game is played now. And I think that was a lot of the questions people had back in 2018 when he was picked to be the number one pick for the Phoenix Suns coming out of Arizona, which people I think are also, unwilling to see that this guy has been in the crosshairs of the Arizona state lines for years now. I mean, really, when he went to Arizona, and then ultimately when he, if I'm not mistaken, he played high school ball in Arizona, he's been there his whole career, his whole basketball life. And when you start to really break it down, this is where he's been the whole time. Now for him to step back all of a sudden before the season starts and say, oh yeah, by the way, I'm just as valuable as my predecessors, as my colleagues, as the guys who came in with me. It's fascinating because from a where he's gotten to in his career at this point perspective, yes, he's right. He's been a major team player, and he's been a huge part of why Phoenix has been successful over the past year and a half, really honestly since they joined the bubble and then got into this past 72 game season. Yeah, he's been a major part of why they've been successful, but he's not the reason. And I think that is where the conversation of when the GM and him sit down, which they have, and they've discussed, of what is his value for this team in his first renewal contract, his second big contract that he's going to have. Some other team is going to give him a max deal. That's going to happen. Someone's going to pay him what people are assuming that he's worth, which is a max deal for where he's at. But the problem is that going to correlate and translate into the value that he'll bring potentially to allow for that team to flourish wherever he goes, whether he stays on Phoenix, whether he leaves, whether he goes somewhere else to be valued, to do what he does. Can he provide that offensive juice and that offensive firepower to be a part of a team a la, a guy like Trae Young or a guy like Luka Doncic? I just think the way the game is being played today, unless he develops into a Joel Embiid, which Joel Embiid offensively is an absolute dynamite superstar. Whereas you look at a guy like Deandre Ayton, and you look at him and you say, no, he's not that. He's not Nikola Jokic. He's not, defensively, you can make the debate Nikola Jokic is really kind of mad defensively, but then offensively, Nikola Jokic is an absolute dynamo. He just does everything. And then Joel Embiid is a legend offensively, and defensively, he's just absolutely elite when he's healthy. And so I think to compare him to those big men is not fair, because defensively, he's more of a, player-wise, he's more of a Rudy Gobert, impact the floor defensively, and offensively, he's not a liability. I mean, Rudy Gobert, you can make the debate at times, he can be a liability, but a guy like Deandre Ayton, when you watch him offensively, he fits in the flow of what they do. He's not a focal point of what they are. And I think from a GM's perspective and from, a player career, what is his impact on the team perspective, you look at a Deandre Ayton and really comparing him for what this Phoenix Suns team is. You look at a Golden State Warriors team for the way they've been constructed from the last decade, from 2015 all the way through the end of the decade when KD left. They were constructed in a way where it was Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, really those two. And then, when KD got there, that's a whole different animal. But when those players were together really in the middle portions of the last decade, that team was developed around Steph, Klay, and Draymond. And if you really want to break it down in how this team is developing, and I know Draymond is a different animal, one of the greatest glue guys of all time. Defensively is absolutely a genius. His ability to coordinate and communicate things and teach and really kind of survey the floor of what he wants to do, see things in advance, his anticipation, his athleticism. Defensively, he is just an all-time specimen legend regarding what he does on the defensive side of the floor, and no one's going to debate that. But when it comes to role and what he provides for what that Warriors team was pre-KD, that's about as good as you're going to get with the Deandre Ayton. And I think what's really, really unfair is that Deandre Ayton has probably a better bag than a Draymond Green in regards to his ability to score the basketball, but to become the focal point to earn that max contract that he's claiming that he should deserve, it's very hard to see that based on the fact that they have Chris Paul signed to an extension. They've got Devin Booker for X amount of years for the long term. And if Deandre Ayton wants to feel like he's a part of that mold and that long-term longevity, I think offensively he really has to have more of a skill set and a prominent bag available for him to put together something so that he has more options for that team to go to. I'm not saying he doesn't already do that. I'm not saying he doesn't already have those capabilities. But the problem is that if you sign him to this long-term max deal that he wants, or that he should get, quote unquote, that he's trying to provide, and say that he's in the same category as his other guys like Luka, like Trae, the problem is now you start to say, well, I'm on that level. When in reality, he's not from a volume perspective, because I think in his first couple years when he was given those volume responsibilities, you look at it and you start to say, Luka's held this responsibility since he got here. I mean, day one he got in the league, he dribbles the ball and handles the ball on 80% of the game. I mean, 80% of what the Dallas Mavericks do is Luka Doncic. And you can make the case maybe for Trae Young, it's like a 50 to 40% range, but Deandre Ayton, like, when you watch them now and the success that they have, he might be a 10 to 15%er, and when he gets the ball, he doesn't have the volume capabilities to do what those guys do, to be the focal point of what they are. And if the Phoenix Suns want to move forward and be great and be in the conversation of what they were last year, which is be a Western Conference competitor for a championship, viability for the future, we know Chris Paul's not playing forever. We know Chris Paul's maybe got 2 more years under his belt to actually play the game. 3 at best. 4 is stretching it in regards to being a real impact guy. But if you're really banking on a Devin Booker and a Deandre Ayton to be the focal point of this team, I think that's a very throwback mentality to the way that you should operate your team. The game today is so outside oriented in regards to where you distribute and create your offense and get things going. It's really addition drive. It's more of a just drive and pile and dish and kick and really get the guards involved, shoot threes. It's so different. The mid-range game is almost non-existent. Not to say that guys like it doesn't exist still, because obviously guys like Kevin Durant absolutely have perfected the mid-range game. But when it comes to a Deandre Ayton, I mean, he almost has to really evolve into a Joel Embiid type to really be even worth what that max is for the Phoenix Suns to have some kind of confidence in their ability to sign him that way. That's not saying it can't happen. He's still 23 years old. He's an incredible player for where he is in his career. He's on a great trajectory to be an absolutely dynamic monster in the paint. He is an absolute force to be reckoned with for where he's at in his career. But we've also seen guys who are at this point in his career to where they are, to where they could be better than what a Deandre Ayton is for what he's asking. Does that make sense? And so in that regard, you look at him and you look at his skill set and what he provides, at least offensively. Defensively, he's fine. Defensively, he's absolutely phenomenal. He's going to be in the conversation of maybe not defensive player of the year, but he's going to be in the conversation of having a defensive, getting on the all defensive team, which if I'm not mistaken, he's already there. But my point is that for him to get that max, you have to have a complete package offensively. And I don't think we've seen it, nor do I think that the Phoenix Suns are confident in that he can provide that. Now, does that not mean that now walking into tonight or, games moving forward as we start the season, that he isn't given more of an opportunity to show that he's more of a max contract guy specifically for the Phoenix Suns? Obviously, we can see that this season. There's going to be more opportunities. There's more of a push. I think the Suns know that as an organization, they need to know if this is what their future holds with the Deandre Ayton. Because again, I'm not trying to sit here and say Deandre Ayton isn't good. He is absolutely a fantastic player at his position. But the way the game is structured today, it doesn't suit what he does specifically for what the game provides, because the game is not in that direction. And that's unfortunate, because I felt like the moment he got drafted and the moment that year went underway of this college year in 2017, 2018, and then when he got to the NBA, I was sitting there thinking, man, if DeAndre Ayton existed 20 years ago, this guy would be the bona fide elite guy that would be no debate, the number 1 pick. But when we went into that draft, if we just kind of do some look back and, retroactively remember, we were talking about guys like Luka and Trae and the guards that were available. And you sat there and you said, wow, DeAndre Ayton is an absolutely phenomenal center and he can step into the league and produce right now. But is he going to be a guy that we look at and say his value means something because the game is not centered around centers anymore? It's just not. And that's what I was curious in seeing. And now hearing his comments and where he's at, it's a twofold, two-pronged situation where he could be seen as a max guy for what they can provide for their team if they want to surround their team around Devin and DeAndre Ayton, it can work, but then they're going to have to bank on guys coming to their team either at a discount, or they're going to have to bank on the draft and getting guys to fill in as that third or fourth role player to be a major contributor to their team to be successful the way they were this past year. And I think in some regards what the Phoenix Suns did this past year, which was going to the NBA Finals, I think it hurt them in some regard, because now when you look at them, you say, yeah, they're in the conversation for being a top 4, top 5 team in the West. And the way they played this past year, they're absolutely in that conversation. But I think it became kind of a curse, because now with DeAndre Ayton, you look at him and you say, damn, like, he's a good player, and yeah, we can sign him, but a max for him, is that really worth what we want to do and how we want to structure our organization? The Suns have not had legitimate, stable success for over a decade. And for them to finally see some kind of glimpse of hope, and to have one of their key players, I wouldn't say role player because that's not fair, but one of their key contributors on defense and especially offensively in spots, that's tough for him to push the envelope, because now you start to say, dang, if we go away from him and we change the narrative and we go somewhere else and we change, what if he does blossom somewhere else and turn into a Joel Embiid? We wasted that opportunity to keep that guy, and now we're again the same old Phoenix Suns, the dumpster fire that we've been for the last decade, and will have been legitimately ripped on whatever social media platform or in the news or across the association of, this is why we constantly keep failing, because we can't see what's in front of us. And I think that DeAndre Ayton is pushing that narrative and pushing that envelope again. But I think the Phoenix Suns, fortunately, are in a situation where they have leverage. I think the one part that DeAndre Ayton may be hurting himself on is that he's hurting his leverage for the offseason to come back as that guy, because now it allows for the Phoenix Suns to see, not that they're not already doing this, because they are, but it allows them to really sit back and see, okay, we've got a year to process this. If you work out, if you do what we think you can do based on what you said, and you actually come out and play like a Joel Embiid or a Nikola Jokic, and you're a top 5 center in the league, which I don't know if he's there, but he might be close. He's probably top 10. But my point being is if he's in that category and he feels like he's actually there and he becomes that, well, then the Phoenix Suns have found a way to say, you know what, you are worth that. We're going to go with the Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, 1-2 punch moving forward, and finish out with Chris Paul. And hopefully that works out for the next 2-3 years. And hopefully it'll be something that's successful, and that when we go into the draft and, go through a minor rebuild, that we can find a way to revolve around everything DeAndre Ayton and Devin Booker. And when that becomes the case, maybe that's where we go. But again, it all has to play out, and it all has to be something that moves forward as time moves forward with the way the league is processing. Okay. I wanted to get on this because I felt that it is valuable, because I know a lot of it is not basketball, but fortunately basketball starts tonight, and I'll get on that after I talk about this. The Kyrie Irving situation. I've already brought up Ben Simmons from a couple shows ago. I've now addressed DeAndre Ayton and his circumstance regarding his contract, etc. But obviously the biggest story and the biggest news before the season has begun is the Kyrie Irving's fiasco. Whether you want to call it a fiasco, whether you want to call it indifference, etc., I don't know. I don't care. My point being is that obviously from a basketball perspective, is what everybody's been stating, is it impacts it, right? It impacts the season for the Nets no matter what. Now, if by the time this podcast comes out, he's been traded, or if the news changes, or if something, overall is going, this is a very, very growing concept and a growing circumstance. And from a basketball perspective, I won't dive too far into it, because we don't know by the time my podcast comes out for the season starting, it's going to be very, very, hard for me to change any narrative based on where he could be basketball wise. So I'm just saying this from what Kyrie's perspective is, mentality has been over the last 5 years. Because over the last 5 years, Kyrie Irving has shown constant signs of inconsistency. And I think from where a lot of people's, I wouldn't say frustrations, but mocking mentality towards him regarding, him not getting vaccinated, the flat earth thing, all the weird promises, the just awkwardness that he provides in general, and the content that he creates because of his lack of ability to stay on the same path of everything that he represents. It's very, very hard to sit there and believe a guy, whether I believe him or like his stance or not. It is very hard to stand with a guy a certain guy, because it could be anybody, but it's hard to stand with this particular entity when over the last 5 years, all he's done is really strike out on everything he said. And it's all gone against different narratives and different paths, which again, when you start to really lay it out and break it down, you start to say, well, what does this guy really stand for? What does he represent? What is he going after? What is his main cause? And maybe that's just for me. And I would love to. I would love for people to promote this and to open this up and to really see, because I doubt it would ever even happen, and I know it would never happen, because God forbid if an NBA player were to ever talk to me, we would not have the greatest conversation, and nor would anybody really ever even care, because I'm just some random Joe Blow at the lead SM who's been here for 6 years, etc. You get my point. Like, if I ever got the chance to sit down with Kyrie Irving, I would ask him multiple questions in regards to consistency. Because I think a lot of people are mocking him and his decision to not get vaccinated, I think is unfair. But at the same time, when you say it's unfair, it's really difficult with a pedigree that's been created by Kyrie Irving to sit there and say, well, you did this to yourself. You keep doing it to yourself, you get kind of what you deserve. And it sucks to say that, because I think the guy has a severe mental illness problem going on. And that's not to sit here and sound like somebody who is trying to make fun of that or make light of that, or to go into an atmosphere of saying mental illness is something that is not a big deal. No. I think it's really a big deal for Kyrie Irving. And I don't want to play therapist on the radio or here for the podcast, because I know that's not what you're here for. But I want to go down the path of consistency. And this goes into basketball, this goes into his decisions off the court and his decisions altogether on how things have all played out and up to this point before the season begins, right? August of 2017, this dude stated to the media and apparently had the same opinion in 2017 about LeBron James, basically stating that he wanted to go to a team to become the focal point of the offense. He didn't feel like LeBron James was, quote unquote, paraphrasing obviously, that LeBron James was as good of a leader as he was. Now, you fast forward that, he got traded in August of 2017 to the Boston Celtics. 2018 rolls around. He's not healthy. He doesn't even play in the playoffs for the reasons that he didn't. LeBron James leads his team all the way to the NBA Finals. They were not good enough to beat the Warriors that year, because nobody was good enough to beat the Warriors that year. But what LeBron James did in the Eastern Conference was absolutely breathtaking and incredible in 2018, yet Kyrie Irving couldn't even show up because he was hurt. Now, that's not fair to Kyrie Irving, because if he would have played, it might have been a different series. That Boston-Cleveland series was absolutely phenomenal, but if Kyrie Irving was healthy, it probably would have been a different story, and who's to say Boston doesn't go to the NBA Finals, and yada, yada, yada. If ifs and buts were candies and nuts, we'd all be, I can't remember the saying, but you get my point. Like, Kyrie Irving constantly digs his own holes of problems that he can't find a way to get himself out of, because he doesn't hold any kind of standard. I want to go play for a different team because I feel like I could be a better leader than LeBron James. That didn't happen. That just didn't happen. When he decided to leave LeBron James, I was on his side, because I was like, thank you. Somebody's finally trying to hold LeBron James accountable for things that he clearly can never get over the hump of. And Kyrie Irving clearly feels like he's under the shadow of LeBron, where he feels like he could become better. I said, let's see what happens. And I like the fact that he's challenging LeBron to do this. He never did it. He never made it happen. It never worked. Kyrie Irving was what? In Boston for 2 years, 3 years, maybe 2 years, barely that, because he was hurt half the time. And then when he got to the Nets, when he finally got to the Nets, then you look at the scenario of him being on the Nets, and when all the COVID stuff started happening, when he finally got healthy and came back for the Nets, all the COVID stuff started happening. He then decided to leave because of family circumstances, etc. And he would constantly break protocol for what was needed to happen for him to be on the court. And then when he did find a way to get back on the court, he then found a way to step off the court again and stay inconsistent. And it would claim that it was family problems or mental health, or he just needed to be away, or didn't feel like playing, or for whatever reason. And it was all built around inconsistency to not make sense. And then you start seeing that he's hanging out with people outside of team circumstances and team scenario things, getting fined for not showing up or following COVID protocol, or doing all these shady things that in all reality, didn't really mean anything for the long run of things. But in regards to the modern day layout of the way the rules were set up, everybody else had to follow those same rules. Everybody else had to follow the same layout of the way things were. And again, the vaccination, circumstance and scenario, I have my own personal feelings and my own personal thought process on it, and I won't bring them up here. But in regards to his ideology of the vaccination, I don't think anybody necessarily has a problem with his ideology of the vaccination, because as we've seen players like Karl Anthony Towns, he's come out and said, I want guys to have a choice. Jonathan Isaac, even though I think he caved and took the vaccine, I think he found a way to really authentically go out and tell his side of why he initially wasn't getting the vaccine, or etc. I think Andrew Wiggins was in the same boat. He eventually caved and didn't and finally got the vaccine, but he even supported Kyrie Irving. I heard LeBron James support Kyrie Irving to some degree based upon the freedom of what you put in your body, etc. And again, that's not to say that I don't think people are against the nature of the angle in which Kyrie Irving is taking for why he's not taking the vaccine. I think what the problem, unless you're a Nets fan, obviously if you're a Nets fan, we all get it. But outside of that, I think the problem is it's just a giant buildup of all the other crap that's happened. I mean, the dude literally called out Cleveland as an organization, which fair, they're not the greatest organization. But he called out Cleveland and then went to Boston and essentially flamed out. Then, after leaving Boston, he goes to the Nets, where if I'm not believe he's not very healthy to begin with. And then, when he is healthy, he decides not to play for whatever reason, whether that's mental health, whether that's, real family stuff going on. He still doesn't abide by the rules based upon what's set in place. So now he sounds like somebody who's just like, I don't want to do it because I don't want to do it. That's not how you conduct yourself as a professional, just in general. And then on top of that, he's trying to find loopholes to do things that really no one should be doing, because these are just the rules that are in place. And in all reality, it's super unprofessional. And then, come before the season starts, you're not vaccinated and you choose not to be vaccinated, even though the understanding is in the state that you're in that, you can't play unless you're vaccinated, which again is fine. But in regards to that choice and that circumstance, if you had just stayed consistent prior, if you had stayed consistent with your same theme of whatever you believe in or whatever your circumstances are, then I think everybody would sit back and say, okay, Kyrie doesn't want to get vaccinated. This is fine. How do we find a trade partner? But now, with all this inconsistency and all these things that you've done constantly over the years of proving why you are just not a very dedicated individual, not to say he doesn't care. Again, another example you can bring up is back when Kobe died, which not fair, definitely not a fair example, but it's a legitimate example. People were talking about Kyrie Irving might retire from basketball after Kobe Bryant passed away. I've heard he, within the last week, that he might retire if he can't play because of this vaccine stuff. He constantly threatens the fact that he may or may not play. He doesn't show up to certain things. He doesn't follow the rules based on COVID protocol. There's all these things that he's constantly in and out of, and he starts to become, doesn't even start, he is an inconsistent guy that you can rely upon within your organization to even show up. So does the risk or does the reward outweigh the risk? And it gets to a point where if you're willing to trade for a Kyrie Irving, if you're willing to trade for him and see if he will work or work out or play or be what he needs to be, that becomes a really, really, really tough spot for the Nets to be in regards to their ability to trade the guy. Again, that's not saying that, he's not an unbelievable basketball player, because in my opinion, he's one of the greatest, if not, outside of maybe Isaiah Thomas, and unfortunately he plays in the same era as Steph Curry, but outside of a couple of players, Allen Iverson, he's one of the greatest finishing guards of all time, period. He is an absolute magician in regards to his ability to finish at the rim. And that's not against what anybody knows. Everybody knows this. Everybody understands this. But in regards to the leverage that the Nets can provide for their ability to trade him so that he actually can get back out and play, even though I've also heard the rumor that if he doesn't play with Kevin Durant, he's also going to retire. Again, all these things that come up with him are just constant inconsistencies. And if you're an owner of all other 29 teams within the league, it becomes a really, really, really hard selling point to try and get equal value for the talent that he provides along with his ability to be available. That is so difficult to balance and know. And for the Nets, that is such a brutal spot to be in. On top of knowing that you may end this guy's career because he'll trade him or because he's not there or because, all these circumstances. And it just becomes more and more and more of a problem for him, the league, the NBA, everything surrounding. And it's so frustrating and so, it's just, that moment where you're like, damn it, this guy is such a good, incredibly fun basketball player to watch that after all the things that are going on, you decide to not follow a rule, which I don't have a problem with his choice. I just have a problem with the whole adding up and domino effect and the things add up over time based upon how you're performing. And that's what's frustrating, is that he's doing this again, and he's doing it again for, I think good reasons, and I think well-intentioned reasons, but based upon the previous outlet of examples that I've provided, they seem very, very, very flawed, because as he goes about his reasoning and his explanation, he then goes back to the old Kyrie of, well, I'm just going to throw out convoluted information or not really say anything and just exist and be here and try to make a point and try to be seen, or whether it's his mental health or whether it's narcissism or whether it's for whatever reason, it comes into this, well, what the heck is this guy really even doing in the first place outside of playing basketball and trying to make statements and turn into the next, martyr or a guy who comes out and makes an example of things, when in reality, all it is, he just goes out there and plays basketball. I'm not trying to tell him to shut up and dribble. I'm not trying to sit here and say that. I'm just trying to stay consistent. Kyrie Irving's not any of those things. He hasn't been consistent for over 4 years. Since he got traded from the Cleveland Cavaliers, he has been nothing but a pain to the entire league. And for everybody that's covering him or talking about him or seeing him or watching him play, he has all this immense talent. But for some reason, what's in between the ears is constantly holding him back, and everybody who tries to support him and help him get to become the great player that he is, to stay that way and to be that way consistently. For some reason, there is something between the ears that is occurring with this man that constantly gets him to not be available. And I don't know what it needs to be. I don't know what it is. I don't know who needs to untap that potential. But I think a lot of us thought that when he got to not Golden State, I'm thinking of Kevin Durant. When he got to the Nets to play with Kevin Durant, I think a lot of people thought that this would finally uncork the Kyrie Irving that we expected coming into Boston to be the guy that was going to turn into the guy we saw in the 2016 NBA Finals and have him play like that all the time. And unfortunately, it's again been the same example of Kyrie just constantly flailing and throwing out convoluted messes that a lot of people just for some reason can't see through, because he constantly makes the waters unbearable to even look through. You can't see what he's actually talking about or what he's trying to do, because he constantly makes it a different entity and a different goalpost and a different conversation. That is what's frustrating about Kyrie. That is why I think a lot of people are upset at this choice of the vaccination. I hear it both sides of the argument, whether it's blue, red, in regards to Kyrie Irving. And what's really frustrating is people are using Kyrie Irving as a crutch point based on their political agenda and their political view. And what's super frustrating about it is if people didn't look at it from a political agenda view and they looked at it from a humanistic view, you would see someone who clearly is struggling with a lot in his life, in his mind, in whatever scenario, feelings that he has. And based upon his actions, strictly his actions, not any political or agenda or anything created, it is strictly based on actions over the last 4 years since he went to Boston. It has been a constant problem with him being available and consistency. It has been a problem. And that's just not being a hater or being rude or being, disingenuous. That's just the fact. He cannot find a way to stay available, whether it's health, whether it's mental, whether it's family, whether it's choices to be vaccinated, whether it's anything. This man will not do everything he can to play the sport of basketball. And I've heard many people say, Maybe this dude just doesn't love the game. Maybe he just loves what the game gives him. And that's not to say that he doesn't love the game, because clearly if you're hurt and you come back from rehab and you do all these things to get back out on the court, you love the game and you love it with all your heart. And I've heard him have the quotes and say the quotes of, I love this game. I don't love what comes with the game, regarding all the media and the hype and the nonsense and the BS. And I don't blame him. But at the same time, that's what comes with it, right? Kyrie Irving can easily go play overseas. If he loves the game so much, go play overseas. No one's stopping you from playing overseas. No one's stopping you from playing in the G League. No one's stopping you from playing at the rec center in the summer. No one's stopping you from any of these places. But only you can constantly keep on denying your ability to play the game for whatever reason. It's always something, right? It always comes back to it's always something with this guy. And I think that ultimately is why people are so upset and they're so frustrated with Kyrie Irving, because they get to a point where they're like, what is it now? Like, what is it now? What is it now? It's just always something. And I think that's ultimately where the problem lies, and why people ultimately are so fed up and frankly just done with Kyrie Irving. Okay, let's get into the games for this opening night. We've got the Nets, we've got Milwaukee, and I tell you what, I think one of the things I'm looking forward to between the Nets and Milwaukee, obviously the ring ceremony. I'm excited to see Giannis get his ring. I'm sure everybody who's listening to this is just jacked for Giannis, because I tell you what, this man over the last 4 years has just put in the absolute work to get to where he is, really his whole career, really the last 5-6 years since really he joined the league. He has just absolutely put in the work. He's evolved as a player, the culture. He's the main focus of that organization. It is remarkable what he's doing. He's turning into an absolute legend before our eyes. And I think coming into opening night with Kevin Durant, James Harden, I understand the Kyrie Irving situation, which we just said, whether he plays or not. It's kind of a here or there, neither here nor there situation. But I think Kevin Durant and Giannis Antetokounmpo on opening night is going to be a storyline starter for the season that I think everybody needs from a basketball perspective. The conversation obviously has come forward about Kevin Durant being back in the good graces of being the best player in basketball. And I don't think anybody will debate the fact that he's in the conversation. Nobody can. It's just undeniable. If you watch the Eastern Conference semifinals, he was a one-man wrecking crew, and there was nothing nobody could do because he was that dominant. And in regards to Kevin Durant's ability to carry a team, we've seen it before. We've seen him get to points in his career where he can carry a team no matter the baggage, no matter the burden, no matter the injury situations or the problems. He can do it. And I think this is the year where finally a full year of complete and utter health to go out and do what he wants to do. I think he's going to absolutely annihilate the NBA. But I think the other guy in that spectrum of the best player in basketball is Giannis. I think, frankly, this game is going to show who the two best players are in basketball, and it won't even be a debate. I think we're going to walk into the Golden State LA Laker game, and we're going to sit there and say, well, damn, who's going to really top that? I know a lot of people are talking about Steph Curry and LeBron James being in the conversation as two guys who you could make the debate are the best players in basketball, which is fair. They still are. And that's a tribute to LeBron James and his ability to play, damn near 20 years in this league, which is unbelievable and remarkable by itself, which is saying something. If you still have him in the top 5 in the league, which he still is absolutely insane. But even to be in the conversation as the best player in the league is absolutely remarkable for him. And then Steph Curry, we all know what he did in the last month of the season, which was ridiculous. What did he average, like 35, 39 points a game? I mean, he was absolutely incredible. His ability to carry the squad, really, without Clay and Draymond being iffy here and there and all the situations they're going through, you could have made the debate that Steph Curry was the best player in basketball by a long shot early portions of April, when he had to carry that team to their ability to get to where they needed to. They lost multiple games by 50 points last year, like 40, 50 points. And when he was on the court, he made them feasible as an organization and competitive. That is remarkable, considering what they had to go through. So, but I think that Eastern Conference game, first game of the year, Giannis getting his ring, Milwaukee getting hype, everyone coming back to really a regular NBA season again, mid-October, full crowd capacities, all these things. We're getting back to the normalcy type things. I think Giannis and KD are going to absolutely light each other up. I wouldn't be shocked if both got 40 opening night minimum, because they're both just that good and that remarkable that I think we'll walk into the Lakers and Golden State game and we'll sit there and be like, Steph and LeBron are ridiculous, but Giannis and KD are next level great right now, and we need to appreciate when they face off against one another, because that, I think, is the combination of the two best players in basketball right now. And again, that's no knock on LeBron, no knock on Steph, because they're in that conversation too. But it's just different. It's just different with those two guys. And it's going to be exciting watching the Lakers and Golden State play as well. And the thing I want to see about Golden State in that game is, are they going to be better in regards to their depth? Moving forward with what roster they have and who they have laid out for this season. We all know about Steph and his ability to carry the load and his ability to win games. And we all know about Draymond. I mean, Draymond Green's ability to carry the absolute load as a defensive dynamo is absolutely insane and ridiculous. The problem is that these guys, and some of these guys, really genuinely just kind of show up and do what they do in the basis and in the premise of what they can. Especially Draymond. Draymond is a great example of a guy who shows up and does what he does in the postseason. We saw that in the wild card game. Remember, he had all that energy and all that excess ability to do what he did, to show that he could just be the absolute, one of the absolute best players in basketball in the playoffs. But the problem is he doesn't show it every night. And I think that on opening night, Draymond Green needs to come out and really kind of start off his season strong and get it going underway in a great way. And I think the best way to do that is to show his ability to play that way against LeBron James on opening night and prove that he's still in that category of elite defenders, which I know he will. But then it'll also allow for LeBron James to try and show us that, hey, he's playing against a guy like Draymond Green, really I'd say in the prime, probably back half prime of his abilities. And if LeBron can still do it against a guy like Draymond, again, another proving factor of, man, 19th year in the league and this dude is still absolutely handing it to fools. I mean, that's what we're looking at here. That's what we're looking at here with this overall thing. You look at the Golden State Warriors roster, Jordan Bell, fantastic player. Bahikula, I didn't know they had Avery Bradley. That's a fantastic pickup. And they got Andre Iguodala back. I heard about that as well. Kevon Looney. They're very, very young. They're a very, very stout team. When they get healthy with Klay Thompson, they're going to be a team that's going to have some serious depth. I mean, I see it. They got some veteran depth out there. They got some young guys who can blend in very well. I think if the Golden State Warriors can come out and play against the Lakers early on in this game and look relatively decent, they don't have to win. But as long as they keep it like a 5 to 10 point game for a vast majority of the game, and they keep it a competitive game regarding keeping it close, even down the stretch, having it be what it is, that's where you step back and you start to say, wow, when they get fully healthy and are fully in tune, this becomes an absolute juggernaut team again. And I think that that's what we want to expect and see of the Golden State Warriors. And the Lakers, they're going to be so much fun to watch opening night. I mean, you got Russell Westbrook, you got Carmelo Anthony, you got LeBron. I mean, you can just list off the players and the names. It's going to be a fun game overall. And I'm just excited for it, and I'm excited for you. Thanks again for listening to the Hoopers Log, everybody. Episode 5 is in the books. We're going to get you onto the W now for the Wednesday episode. They're going to recap or talk about what's going on in the WNBA finals between Phoenix and Chicago. I myself got to watch a couple of those games. Tell you what, the women's game, WNBA, it is a game where fundamentals is absolutely king. I tell you what, I tuned in and watched Diana Taurasi and a couple of those gals just hooping it up. And let me tell you something, man, it's the best part about watching the WNBA is the fundamentals, or even just women's basketball in general, is that their fundamentals are absolutely on point. And it's refreshing because when you watch, men's basketball, let's be honest, there's a little bit of sloppiness because they can kind of afford to be so because guys are so athletic that sloppiness just kind of pops up. But when you watch the women's game and the way it shapes up and how it plays, it is so refreshing because really, the way the women play in the WNBA is the way that about 95 to 90% of basketball is played around the world because fundamentals is absolutely king. And that is what the WNBA finals reminded me of when I tuned in and watched guys, women like Candace Parker, Diana Taurasi, Brittany Griner. When you're watching them and obviously the other role players play out, it's just a beautiful game to watch. And it's just a reminder of how beautiful this sport of basketball is here at the Lead SM. I want to thank you all for listening to me again. Again, opening nights tonight. Please just enjoy yourself. Watch TNT, watch Chuck and the boys, Ernie and everybody. What a beautiful night, y'all. I'm so excited to be here again with you and excited for some actual action to tip off for all these things to take place. It is going to be an absolutely fun season, the 75th season of the NBA. It's going to be a great one. I can't wait to watch it. I can't wait to be here with you all season long. Every single Tuesday, the W is on tomorrow. Enjoy them as well. Have a good one.